You're listening to China Africa Talk.
Jambo, ni Bridget akikuletea kipindi kinachohusiana na China na Afrika.
Vous écoutez le dialogue sino-africain avec Bridget.
Everything China, everything Africa.
Olá, você está ouvindo China Africa Talk com Bridget.
سيداتي وسادتي مرحبا بكم في الحوار الصيني العربي مع بريجيت.
Welcome back to the program. I'm Bridget Mutambirwa and I bring you discussions on what's happening with China and Africa from a Chinese and African perspective. 2025 is a year of significant milestones for China-Africa partnership. It's the 25th anniversary of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, or FARCAC, solidifying its role as the central platform for joint planning and action. A historic trade policy has also taken full effect. China extended zero-tariff treatment to all 53 African countries, boosting exports and industrial growth across the continent. Despite global economic headwinds, bilateral trade has reached new heights, demonstrating the resilience and strategic importance of this partnership. On new frontiers, the digital transformation has been accelerating.
China does not really want Africa to miss the chance for its own leapfrog for the digital programs.
Green cooperation continues to flourish as evidenced by the launch of several clean energy projects across the continent.
Recently, a new ECOWAS Secretariat was completed in Abuja. Also, it took into account the green component of development. Water projects in Abuja also. Nigeria also took into account the environmental protection.
As the year 2025 comes to a close, what other key moments have defined China-Africa relations? How significant has this partnership evolved? To find out more, I'm now joined by Professor Liu Baocheng, Director of the Center for International Business Ethics at the University of International Business and Economics, and Charles Onunaiju, Director of the Center for China Studies in Nigeria. Gentlemen, it's great to have you again on the program.
Yes, it's always a pleasure working with you.
Thank you for having me, as usual. Thank you so much.
Now, to begin our discussion, I'll start there with you, Professor Liu. How would you characterize China-Africa relations in 2025, and what were some of the key moments or milestones that stood out for you?
Well, the China-African relationship in this year can be best described as deepening and more diversified, more strategically balanced, and also more forward-looking, marked by the expanded cooperation across our economic, technological, cultural, and governance fronts, and also more of the advanced technologies together with equipments and also the gathered strengths from both sides to engage more deeply with each other. I could say in terms of the strategic depths on the deals, China has really liberated all the tariff for 53 countries. And that's going to be quite a push and also incentive for African products to end up in China at very low cost. And also that while the traditional building of those infrastructures are still in place, cooperation increasingly are emphasizing on local industrialization, technological transfer, value-added processing to push further for regional integration. And now with the African Free Trade Agreement across more than 50 countries. So that's quite a great news while the implementation is still on the agenda for the Chinese companies. We also noticed there is more maturing partnership between both sides. So our relationship has evolved from primarily project-based economic ties towards more institutionalized cooperation, including particularly represented at the FUCAC, the policy dialogue, capacity building, green growth, and the shaping of a digital ecosystem. And then the FUCAC has been also, over the past 25 years, has also engaged the multi-stakeholders from minister level to the top political leaders, and more the business community are being activated to participate. Also, over the recent G20 in Africa, we also noticed there is a greater multilateral engagement where China actively engaged with African countries with a broader global governance framework. We are also pushing forward for WTO reform in a joint efforts. Also, Africa is now offering a stronger collective voice on the development and strategic agenda for global reform. So, all this brings this to with a multi-holder participation format on a very close front now.
I was just reflecting back, and for me, the relations have evolved, as you're saying, project-based toward institutionalization and green growth and more digital economy. For me, there's been that change. And then, of course, we have trade as well, which you also picked out there, where we now have zero tariff treatment for 53 African countries. Charles, I'm going to pose that question to you as well. What were the key moments or milestones that stood out for you in 2025?
Okay, well, to go straight to the question, I think without any of doubt, I think market access, which was considerably expanded to include all 53 countries with diplomatic relations to China, announced in June of this year, for me, was quite significant and stood out very well as very low-hanging fruit for African countries. Granting market access to all 53 countries, for me, this is very, very significant in the sense that it has implication for the structure of various African economies. It will help African countries, especially in the context of what we see as a global trade restriction and frictions, tariff wars. It has implication for affecting the structure of various African economies and also has implication to grow their non-mineral export. Like most of their exports are dominated by minerals, oil, and gas. This time around, a whole range of African products shall have access to Chinese market. And of course, this outgoing year was the first year in the implementation of the 10 partnership plans, outline operation from strategic partnership to comprehensive strategic partnership. These are not just rhetoric, these are real, and it has actually had impact in the continent. Of course, the new phase of the Belt and Road construction, which focus on small, beautiful projects that have impact on the life of the people, has picked up across the continent. So these are all very outstanding issues for the year, for me, stood out for this year.
Professor Liu, 2025 marks the 25th anniversary of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. How has this platform shaped China-Africa relations over the years, and what are its most recent developments or trends?
Yes, I should say historically, China and Africa has been quite much apart. One is because of the distance, the other is because of the dominance of the Western countries in Africa. But FOCAC, over the past 25 years, have really brought people together to listen to each other with respect, which is most important. And China has no intention to seek colonization. China just wants to engage with Africa on the collective voices representing the developing countries over the global platform. And we are also looking for long-term engagement for mutual benefit. So FOCAC has really established a shared priority in terms of the mutual understanding for Africa, infrastructure, industrialization, agriculture, and human resource development are really the key. So therefore, China is there to share its own successful experience over almost the half century for its own changes and development. And we have established over the FOCAC more and more tangible implementation roadmaps. And also China has, with its own economic growth, really offered a larger financing capacity to help institutionalize concessional financing in terms of the preferred loans, grants, credit lines, and also even the debt relief for African governments and also for the private factors also. We also notice FOCAC, there's a stronger momentum for policy convergence. The harmonized policy dialogues on trade, investment, and guidelines, environmental standards, and also regulatory alignment. I think one more noticeable issue is the capacity building. Yes. Because there has been continuous delivery of scholarships, vocational training, inviting more the African government officials, business leaders to come and see and share Chinese success stories. Also, more of the Chinese expertise being sent by the government to engage in joint research, in the management of specific community programs, etc. So that's something fundamental, not only for the specific project implementation, but also to connect people with the mind of sincerity and also the integrity. And the other is really the institutionalization of the review mechanism, because OPEC provides a great window opportunity for both sides at different levels to track the outcome and also to offer periodical evaluation of what happened, what has been achieved, what are some of the roadblocks that we need to tackle together, something that totally beyond what some people would criticize as a ceremonial type of declaration.
Charles, one of the key milestones in the China-Africa relations is China's extension of zero tariff treatment to 53 African countries. What is the significance of this policy for both sides?
Yes, for me, like I told you, its significance for Africa is really important, especially, like I told you, is going to have impact in the nature of the structure of African economies. Most of them have been single commodity dependent economies. Like in Nigeria, over 90% of foreign exchange receipts are acquirable from single commodity oil. And this access to Chinese market will shift the structure in favor of other products, especially agricultural products, for which Nigeria is also very famous. So this is not just going to generate more foreign exchange earning and support the strengthening of the domestic currency, but also it will prove non-oil exports for many African countries. And this will also go a long way to consolidate the emerging African free trade area, which, like you know, is the second largest free trade area in the world. Mm-hmm. So these are the implications. And for China, the decline in export to the United States have been offset by exports to non-Western countries, especially African countries. So the two sides have actually been able to avert the worst effects of the tariff wars imposed by the United States, the trade frictions. They have been able to strengthen their trade engagement. They have been able to further deepen their economic complementarities. And this has considerably taken away the toxic effects of the trade war unleashed by the United States and some of our partners in the West. So for the two sides, it is very significant that they strengthen their trade. We could see much more exports of Chinese goods to African countries, non-Western countries, significantly improved. Like I said, African countries also gained leverage in importing, especially traditional exports, especially agricultural products and finished products to China. That's why it is very significant that this non-tariff treatment of goods coming from Nigeria and Africa, and of course China, much more diversified trade with Africa has become very significant in the face of crunching international trade situation.
Still on you there, Charles. With China-Africa trade reaching new heights in 2025, how does this growth contribute to both regions, especially in light of global trade shifts like the US tariffs? What does this mean for the broader global economy?
It simply suggests that the global economy is developing more vigor, becoming more resilient as a result of activities of non-Western countries. It reinforces the multipolarist nature of the emerging global order. Of course, like you know, trade is a significant aspect, very important component of this emerging global order. It strengthens the multipolarist order and brings trade within the context of this strengthening. For the world, it simply shows that the rule of multilateral trade is simply not going to collapse because of the sentiments of whoever occupies Washington or other Western countries. And we have seen loosening up of some of the stiff measures. We've seen a remarkable concession because they get hurting. It's like lifting a stone and dropping it upon your leg. That is what this trade war instigated by Washington has seemed to mean. Reality is beginning to sink in. The ideological consideration that was at the root of this trade wars is beginning to loosen. Interestingly, the non-Western trade, the flank of trade between Africa, between developing countries within the BRICS community is growing. The zone is becoming more vigorous.
Right.
And so this simply means that the world system is responsive to some of these issues. It's going to respond to critical objective determinants, not just by the behavior of one state, no matter how powerful and how influential. And this is also very remarkable for the development of the multipolar global order. It is also very remarkable for the development of the multilateral system, for which trade is a very important component. So what we see is the flank of China-African cooperation, the flank of the BRICS mechanism and its outreach becoming much more vigorous, overcoming this politically instigated challenge to multilateral trade. In any case, making greater progress. And what we see from the West is gradual return to the multilateral system, which they try to obstruct. So for me, this is a very important contribution of China-African cooperation to the emerging international order of multilateralism, of multipolarism. And the trend suggests that this will be stronger and much better and not the other way around.
Professor Liu, China's digital engagement in Africa has accelerated in 2025, with companies like Huawei and ZTE leading the charge in 5G, smart cities and cloud computing. How has this digital focus impacted China-Africa relations?
Yeah, I think this is China's belief, both at the political and business level, that digital technology can only be valued based on how it's going to benefit people,
Right.
rather than, how to use it for security control,
Right.
how to use it to play dominance over the rest of the world. Therefore, when China is facing some of the tough restrictions from particularly that of the United States, we are also moving on full speed as for our own digital advancement, and some of the successful fruition immediately actually transferred to many parts of the world, particularly into Africa. So that can really help Africa to have the leapfrogging in its telecom infrastructure. As you mentioned, ZTE, Huawei, these firms are helping Africa to build a 5G network, the fiber backbone expansion, and to construct the data centers, building the cloud platform to enable nations to bypass the legacies of the tech constraints. So therefore, in a way, China will not only be there to enjoy the big five and the rural land, but rather China does really want to share its own experience and its own concern on industrialization. And particularly, China does not really want Africa to miss the chance for its own leapfrog for the digital programs, because there has been a legitimate worry over widened digital divide around the world. And also the e-government, together with the smart cities, are also being introduced in partnership to advance the digital public services, to integrate the health information system, and that can really also help to identify some of the potential impact over human health. And also China particularly focused on the participation from the civil sector. And the other is really the skill transfer, because digital economy requires basic understanding of not only those few number of top expertise, but rather a shared support for building such sort of digital ecosystem to disperse some of the concerns over, the disruptive technologies. And particularly China is there to focus on the training of the young people and also women participation in those digital technologies, and also together by promoting the e-commerce, shifting more, from basic USB to Wi-Fi devices, and also to the high-end satellite synchronization, etc. And I think one thing that is interesting is the e-payment. Because when we go out, we never bring a penny of coins in the pocket anymore. So I think that can also help a big push to help Africa grow on a new type of financial engagement that can also avoid some of the basic worries of theft. I think that's something very interesting.
Charles, could you share some examples of successful green cooperation between your country and China in 2025?
Like you know, most of the projects are underwritten by that concern for greenery. Yeah, so almost every project that has been executed here has taken into account the green component, the environmental protection that have been at the root of most of the projects. Recently, a new ECOWAS secretariat was completed in Abuja. Also, it took into account the green component of development. Water projects in Abuja also, Nigeria, concluded. It also took into account the environmental protection and protection of the ecosystem. These projects, to my understanding, have been broadly underwritten by careful consideration of the fragile ecosystem, ensuring stability in the long run, ensuring that it is done in harmony without doing any serious damage to the environment. The road construction has been very outstanding. One of the key major roads under the Belt and Road construction has also reflected the trend of green development, including the Nigerian most second functional deep sea port now, the Lekki deep sea port, which began about 3 years ago and has rapidly become Nigeria's second largest, most important port, giving the country status of regional maritime hub, has also been done with absolute consideration for sustainability, both for the ocean, both for the surrounding environment, both for the communities. These have all been blended together to give an outlook that is respectful of the ecosystem. And this has been the emerging tradition in almost all major projects involving Nigeria. So I can tell you that basically almost all projects that are up and running, that have been concluded, that are under construction this year, has been done with greater focus on maintaining the ecosystem and integrating the long-term sustainability of the ecosystem within the projects. And the Nigerian-China cooperation key projects have met the threshold, which has been clearly washed over by these environmental groups.
Charles, still on you there. China pledged to train thousands of African teachers in fields like AI and the digital economy from 2025 to 2027. How has China-Africa educational and cultural cooperation evolved, and what impact has this had on their relations?
Yes, to cite typical example, just days ago, the Chinese embassy in Nigeria, along with the Nigerian alumni of China, which is members of the Nigerian public sector who have been trained in China in areas of building, had a very important meeting in Abuja. The communique from that meeting was filled with exciting tributes of Nigerian veterans to participation in training in China, who have been capacity building. They made remarkable, they all spoke about how their capacity have been considerably enhanced, how they have improved in their efficiency and service delivery, how their training has impacted on service delivery, how their ability has been much more deepened, how they have possessed nimble skills in addressing issues more targetedly. It was a harvest of very interesting responses from these very many alumni. It was a very interesting forum to underscore the impact, the import, and critical gaps that this capacity building and training in China is filling, especially in Africa's largest country, Nigeria. And I believe these are repeated in several other African countries. So in terms of skills acquisition, in terms of capacity building, I think China has demonstrated consistency. It's been part of the outcomes of China-African engagement since 2015, when the second China-African summit was held in Johannesburg. And it's been a critical feature in the many outcomes of that meeting. Capacity building, helping African countries to scale up the skill of their manpower, to prepare them for the challenge of the times and prove their competence.
Professor Liu, with 2026 designated as the China-Africa Year of People-to-People Exchanges, what improvements or initiatives can we expect in this area?
Well, China's commitment is not only there to continue, but rather to reinforce.
Right.
And also with more of the spread of the words, and also more importantly with the potential benefits that African people have received. So definitely we're going to further engage with each other in the people-to-people area. We can expect that there will be strengthened vocational and the digital skill training.
Okay.
And so it is highly hoped that there will be more targeted programs in software development, AI creation, the operating of the green technology with more of the artificial intelligence. And also, I think more practically and more significantly is how to introduce digital support on advanced manufacturing.
Okay.
So that Africans have more of the cost-effective operation in adding value to what they can really export.
Yes.
The other is that I would expect that the small and beautiful projects
Yes.
will help to build more very practical and technical institutes for the technological training, and also to infuse more of skill sets into those training. And I would also see it's important really to have the TTT type of approach, train-the-trainer program, because Africa cannot really totally rely on the Chinese part as a trainer. They have to develop their own trainers so that they are able to proliferate the skill sets on a local and communal basis. So me as a professor, we continue to receive the influx of African students on our scholarship. There is also more proposal to build joint research projects, for example, in how to increase the crop and how to make the climate resistant seeds. That can be developed in Africa. And also there are special plants that can deal with the deforestation.
You're also doing a lot behind the scenes there, Professor.
Oh yeah, I've been, offering not only teaching African students and guide some of the entrepreneurship, engage in the foreign government official training program, particularly targeted to Africa. And also, I feel it's not only important, but also it's very rewarding by engaging with people. They are highly attentive and also highly receptive. So that can change many of those biases that has been going on with the world. Oh, they are not really willing to learn. They want to sit under their palm tree. That's something. Of course, more of the cultural exchanges, for example, in building tourism and promoting more of the tourist agencies to educate potential tourists so that they are more inclined to visit Africa. And, Africa also needs to be better prepared in terms of the offering, first of all, security, then hospitality, so that they will be able to create a word-of-mouth effect within the neighbors, friendship circles, so that they can really step up. Because it is not only the tourism per se, but by seeing each other, engaging with each other, people identify more opportunities to work together on some of the successful economic result, etc. And I also hope China and Africa can also benchmark some of the practices China has been doing in terms of the visa facilitation and even visa-free programs to facilitate the exchange of people. Then, because I'm also running a center for green entrepreneurship, hopefully I can also participate in training some of the entrepreneurship, both on the green transformation and also on digital transformation for those young startup boot camps and incubation hubs, also to mobilize, hopefully, some of the investment seed funds.
Looking forward to a lot in 2026 there, I see, Professor.
Yeah.
Now, just to wind up our discussion, gentlemen, could you share with us your personal China-Africa story? Is there a particular experience from this year that stood out for you? Maybe we'll begin with you there, Professor Liu.
Well, talking about wonderful achievements and all the rosy pictures, I got to tell one story of the challenges that we are facing.
Okay.
So on a personal level and academic level, actually, I've been focusing on how the Chinese outbound investment can be better protected in the developing countries in particular. I've been building a case on PetroChina's bitter experience in Niger. PetroChina has been very active to engage in many parts of Africa and particularly now in Niger's oil sector under what was initially appeared to be very favorable conditions. However, following some of the political upheavals, the operating environment shifted dramatically in disfavor of such sort of projects. So the end conclusion for all this, I could see that both sides, we need to be working on selective basis, particularly for business projects. And also the Chinese government needs to work more closely with African countries, particularly when they have a large potential on the upgrading of the investment protection treaties. Also, the business communities need to do far better homework beyond their commercial calculation into some of the civil hurdles and also the possible political commotions, etc. And so there's a far more potential to be unleashed, but we need to engage with each other with more of the stronger commitment and a rule-based operation so that there can be more of the continued and sustained success working with each other, both as a government and a community and also personal levels.
Citing from the challenges that you've made, I think even in all this, with the process of dialogue and making people understand, I think there's always a way to resolve these things.
Yes, I think dialogue is the most important starting point. So there's a lot more homework that we need to do, but only by shaping the confidence, only by the mutual respect, we are able to move further along the positive track.
And how about you, Charles? Could you share with us your personal China-Africa story? Is there a particular experience from this year that stood out to you?
Well, personally, like I said, I have China's story is constantly evolving and moving in very different directions, has remarkable significance in its overall impact. But like I said, I witnessed the vigor of. For me, I have always paid attention, especially to challenges of African various economies, to adapt and move on from their monocultural colonial heritage to a much more vibrant stage in which they became internally integrated, outwardly also improved Ethiopian coffee, making headway with China, Rwandan spice, Kenyan flour and mango, Zambian honey, and agricultural products from various African countries. For me, it is quite a remarkable sight, a very significant mileage in redressing the monocultural tradition or the monocultural heritage of our African economy. We are seeing a real movement in the direction of diversification of these various African economies. Next year, 2026 will be the year of people-to-people exchange between China and Africa. And what we witnessed in 2025 is a good outline of what is to come in 2026. Even more confident China that is open to it is quite exciting for me to see.
Well, I guess for me, my personal China-Africa experience was being able to reach out to more audiences. I'd also like to thank our audiences and the guests who have participated in our program for your support.
No, that's not only a unique contribution to have the media that is responsible and dedicated to engage in bridging information, linking opinions. It could be a disagreement, but that's something there to fertilize the soil for the engagement.
Yes, I also like to say that the platform for telling this story is also part of my unique experience in 2025. Your platform, it gives us a platform to exchange views and reflect on these very important milestones and development in China-African cooperation. So it is my pleasure. We genuinely appreciate.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. From my producer and I, we wish you a happy New Year 2026.
Thank you. The same to you.
Happy New Year.
Listeners, you can subscribe to our online newsletter on CGTN or Substack to get more insights on China-Africa relations. Just search China-Africa Talk. For now, it's goodbye. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others. Post it on social media or leave a rating and review. Thanks again. See you next time.